This is the time that we have set aside and devoted to turning attention inward and away from all form to a large degree. So I invite you to take a deep breath or two, and don't let your mind argue with that. Just do it. When we breathe deeply, we instantly become more fully present. Attention absents the mind, leaves the mind. And let us just feel into that out of which the music came this morning, and out of which these words emerge, and to which they point back. This infinite, ever-present, ever-holy source, this mystery of being which birthed us, is beating our heart presently, is actually the source of our next breath. We take a moment to notice what has perhaps occupied our attention earlier today, and we bless that. Maybe what we have felt, some of us no doubt felt some contractions this morning. It happens to human beings. Occasional waves of emotional pain, the best thing about which we can say is that they will be leaving just as they came. No feelings last. They come and go. Physical body may have some contractions or pains in them. We bless all of these expressions of form. And yet, for now, we allow our attention to be drawn away from form, away from thought, away from feeling, away from so-called physical bodies, and simply rest here in the still, silent, eternal now. This is the one. We know it is the source of everything. All fear disappears in the light of this awareness. It cannot remain. Physical healings can be made immediate. Emotional harmonizing just takes place without us getting back in charge and worrying about it. New thoughts will rise, those that create a new way of being on earth, but we're not after them now. We're not after another thought. Our motive now is simply to return and rest in this presence so that it can work, so that this presence might now emerge, so that we may feel its holy power. So let the words that I'm speaking drift away into the no-thingness. And let us all simply rest in an open awareness, trusting that as we do this, we actually become the light that shines into this world. The light that really lights up everything and everyone in this room effortlessly as we rest ever so gently now in the stillness and in the silence. In the silence. Collectively, we give thanks this morning for this subtle power now being made more conscious in and through and as each one of us. We give thanks for the ability now to be living in a state of answered prayer. Thank you. Is that state. Just being grateful now means everything that follows will work out much, much better. We ask that we be allowed, guided, re-inspired time and again this day and this week to come back, should we depart this state, into gratitude for the next breath. Perhaps we will even expand and see anew that even what we called our problems can be given thanks for. Thank you, we say. Thank you. In the name that is in the nature of the Christ, in Jesus, which same Christ is already who we are. Now, amen and amen. We are in a time of transition. We had a fabulous time in here last night around this topic of returning attention to source. I'm basing the next this series, shall we say, of lessons on Sunday morning on a textbook loosely written by Robert Brummett entitled Finding Yourself in Transition. If some of you want to read that book, we do have some, but let's start out though with I just had a little flash that it really is time for a levity, don't you think? A little levity. So there's a story about a missionary that goes to Canada. The story is told by Johnny Moses of the Nootka Indian tribe, and he's talking about how these missionaries came and to convert the Native Americans, and he said it took the priest years to learn the language. And then he said when the priest did finally learn the language, he began to preach. And Johnny said the people were sorry they ever taught him the language. At any rate, eventually the priest taught the people the rules, and he said, we can't eat meat on Friday, and you need to come to confession once a week, and he would baptize them. And one particularly elderly gentleman in the tribe, the priest gave him a new name, Anthony. And at a certain point along the way, the priest was revisiting the village, and the people told him that Anthony wasn't around, that Anthony had taken off. They weren't sure where he was. The priest went looking for Anthony, and he found him sitting beside a river eating deer, and it was Friday. And the priest asked him, he said, so Anthony, what are you doing eating deer meat on a Friday? And Anthony said, I'm a very, very old man and not very strong. He said, I shot this deer with my bow and arrow. And he said, and I drug him all the way down here to the river. And here, he said, I baptized him and renamed him Fish in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I have been known to tell a story just for the sake of levity. This one for me does make a point at the ridiculousness of literal interpretations of spiritual principles and practices. We need to understand what they're here for, what they point to, of what value are they really. And we can discover these things not in unity. We call them metaphysical interpretations, and psychospiritual depth circles, we might call them archetypal patterns that are seen to be lived through human beings all over the planet, so that there's a way in which we're, despite our differences in culture and our various different conditionings, there are these almost blueprints of life that live us all. We're really not all that different. And we found, particularly through the works of Joseph Campbell, that these archetypal stories and patternings are so similar throughout cultures, no matter that those cultures have had no connection with one another. So one of those stories that I'm going to draw from this morning, and that Robert Brummett draws from in Finding Yourself in Transition, is the story of Moses as an archetypal pattern to help us sort of get a clue about how to hold transitional times so that we can move through them with certain grace and without just absolutely losing it. Because, as you know, not only is this church undergoing a vital transition, life is constant transitions of various sizes and shapes. There's really probably nobody in here that doesn't relate to some form of personal transition right now. And this has not been slowing down lately, I've noticed, haven't you? So finding yourself in transition might mean finding out who letting transition be a way that you learn to see who you really are, so that you're not lost in the transition, because only things transition. See, who you are is immovable, unshakable, and ever present and infinite. So there's that sense of it, but there's also the sense of gaining an understanding and an appreciation for the transition itself, for the shapes that the form of change takes, so that you can see the value in it even when it doesn't feel valuable. So in essence, there's three phases to a transition. There's an end, and if we have to pull this out of the infinite and take an event, every transitional period has an end, a void, and a new beginning. So the end, you can argue and whine and complain and resist and deny, but it's pretty much already happened when you come to it. So it's a matter of sooner or later accepting it, and there are stages of grief that therapists can help us so we can begin a healthier transition by accepting that the end has happened. And that can take time, and we hopefully will be merciful toward one another when we see somebody having a little trouble accepting that something is over. Not all of us do that well, but it's still a fact, and we want to learn to do it well. We don't want to remain in denial and angst. And then the new beginning, of course, is a very happy idea to who we think we are. It's that void thingy, that we'd like to figure out, how do you do that better or get through it quicker or something, is kind of how we think about it, isn't it? That period where the end happened, the new hasn't begun, and we really don't know who we are or what we're supposed to be doing or why this is happening, that kind of wilderness experience, to use another biblical archetypal term. So the story that we're using about Moses, it needs a little bit of, we're going to talk about this each week a little bit more and in different parts of it, but let's do an outline and say that the story of Moses leading the people to the promised land and through the wilderness doesn't quite begin there. It sort of starts when Joseph goes to Egypt, and it's another whole point and another story, but we know that he, through his spiritual gifting, finds himself in a position of great influence and power. And then later, his own family, not even knowing that Joseph, that the brothers thought they murdered and the father thought he lost, is actually second in power. They are in a famine. The people are in a famine, the Jewish people. And they hear that Egypt has food. So we maybe go to Egypt and we can figure out how to survive. That's kind of where this all begins. So a real need initiates the story. And we'll leave alone the part that they get to be, surprised to discover it's their own brother that even told the Pharaoh that he should put up food for years, for this time of famine was coming. He's so gifted. But let's just go to the part that says they go there, they find out that it's their own brother or father. The family member is next to the Pharaoh in power, and so the kingdom is more or less opened up to them. Now, they are second-class citizens in Egypt. The Jewish people are. They get to come and they get to eat, but they've got to serve, and they are not first class. They are second class. They are the servant class. But they're well taken care of. They're made privy to plenty of food and pretty good jobs. It's not a bad living, particularly compared to the famine that hit the land they left behind. So they don't really see that all this comfort has become a kind of captivity. Are you listening? You see the archetypal pattern here? So what happens is we often move, one need gets met in a way that's vital, important, and good. But the very way in which it's met ultimately becomes a prison if we hold on to it too tightly and identify with it too fully. So the people actually become slaves to their own solution. What was once good for them has now got them in captivity. And the Pharaoh isn't really interested in releasing them from captivity. I won't go into the full story, but we'll just say Moses has a spiritual calling. So it would be really good if you could leap right into the realization of this next bit. Who calls him? What is the name of that which calls Moses? I am. So this really brings it home if you let it. I know so many people in metaphysics that thinks, the name of God is I am that I am. They don't realize that what that is actually, this is first person present tense of the verb to be. You're it, is what it's really saying. In the present moment, that I am is what is God. And if you extend it into a future tense, you just lost the presence. So the I am presence, this return to source, which we're speaking to this morning, is actually the spiritual calling to return attention. See, fear takes many guises. It wants to go over here, chase this tail, chase that, worry about this working out, that working out. But the teaching doesn't say this. The teaching says return attention to the infinite, eternal, ever-present source. And all that stuff will be taken care of. This is the teaching. Isn't it? I'm from Texas. We say that. Now I'm from Alabama. Alabama's home. I figure it's okay in Alabama too, isn't it? All right. So this is the calling that Moses, which is you, gets. All these figures in the story represent aspects or unfoldings within us all. That's why they're still valuable. Pharaoh represents the egoic structure, who thinks he's in charge of everything and makes all the decisions. This is typically the highly developed identification with mind in human beings in the Western world. So that almost everything has to run through the mind, and the mind will decide whether it's good or bad or right or wrong. This is a pregnant pause for those that are going when I say this. So we don't make the mind wrong. The mind is an extraordinary spiritual instrument or tool for creation. It's just that it must be the servant and not the master. So the Pharaoh, in the case of the Pharaoh knows what's best. And what's best is the people stay here in captivity and serve us, like they've done for many years. And how do the people themselves feel about this possibility of freedom? You remember the story? Well, where will we go if we leave our captivity, and who will take care of us? Do we have those parts in us? If we let go of the things that we've become overly attached to and convinced are the external sources of our supply, in favor of the possibility that there might actually be an ever-abiding, eternal, inner source, then the ego structure it doesn't go along. So we have both the people expressing the egoic fear, how will we be taken care of, how will things work out, if I leave my captivity, I'm so comfortable and happy here, and I have a job, and I have food, and I have a master to take care of, make big decisions for me. And of course, the master, being the main egoic structure itself, is cool with this. Yes, that's right. You know, you won't be leaving. We got you. I'm in charge here. So this is sort of an internal, you see why this is an important archetypal or blueprint story for us all. I mean, we're encountering this time and time again. I mean, in a given day, you can be in a conversation with somebody where it's happy and you're enjoying it. And yet, you know, it might be time to do something else, and you have to deal with letting go of something you're really enjoying and actually accepting and allowing yourself to move into something new without resistance. We're called in tiny ways each day. And of course, the spiritual calling is inherent in this story too. The fundamental shift from captivity to freedom is at hand in this story. And we know what captivity looks like spiritually. It's not uncomfortable. It's way comfortable. It's just that the comfort has begun to feel somehow kind of limiting. First, we can't quite put our finger on what it is that's so limiting about it. We call it kind of divine discontent, huh? Right? All right. So we're not going to go too far with the story now. We're going to be in transition a little while together. So ultimately, the people do agree to go. And they're not all that excited about it when they get out there in the wilderness, are they? They repeat. They've got the same concerns. One of them is, how are we going to eat now that we're out here? And by the way, the wilderness experience is right up front. We're told this is not an overnight deal. How long were they in the wilderness? Metaphysical meaning of 40, 4 square. It just means the time necessary for a new foundation to be put in place. Really, that's the mystical meaning of from the esoteric science of numerology, which some of you may or may not know anything about. But this is really all this means. It doesn't really mean a long time. It sort of depends on you. How long are you going to continue to be tempted to run back to Egypt and let the Pharaoh give you a job again? And how long is it going to take for you to let go and actually look at what this new calling is, this new earth? This whole point is, will I live in presence? Will I let the fearful ego continue to yak and still not believe it? Will I trust and live here, now, with my attention on the infinite presence right here? I am that. I am. See, that's the right emphasis for these words. I am that. I am. Now, I'm not going to become it. I am it. Becoming it means you'll never become it. That's the lie. It's the full leap into presence that's called for. So that's how we enter the transitional phase, with a sense of strength and inner assurance, because we are in that assurance now. And the fact of a wilderness experience cannot frighten us, because we know we are the infinite in expression. How does the infinite first provide for the people? How does it teach them to live in the present moment? What is the big thing that happens? Gives them manna, which is food that appears on the trees for how long? Come on, y'all know this story, don't you? One day. It's for now only. So the egoic wish and hope and desire that I can bank up a bunch of security for my future years is not satisfied in this calling, is it? We are asked to live in present moment awareness. And if you notice, of course, and I'm almost done here this morning. We're not going to have long, forever services. We're going to be done. We don't need a million things to think about. You get this one already, don't you? So it's really just now. We're in transition, and the training is to live now. And you have 1,000 opportunities a day to return attention to now, or let the next thought absorb you and carry you to where it wants to go. Have you noticed where thought is always running to? Somewhere besides now. 99% of it. We're not saying don't solve your problems. We're saying don't imagine that when you get X, Y, Z problems solved, then you'll be in the kingdom. You'll just have X, Y, and Z solved. You're either in the kingdom now or you're not. Always. And the kingdom is, here we are. Have we eaten this morning, most of us? Or some of us like to skip breakfast. I like a lot of coffee in the morning. But I'm warm. Are you warm? Temperature okay? Pretty good company we're keeping, isn't it? Anything wrong right now? What if that's always true? What if that's the mystery that we're being called to live in? Rather than the ego's idea of building up some kind of security and some kind of prison for itself where it can believe it's secure while still feeling highly limited and frightened anyway. Pretty clear, isn't it? Isn't this the way we humans mostly do it? We make up that when we get this solved over here, then we can be happy. Eckhart Tolle says that we use the present moment in 3 ways. One is as a means to an end. This is the most common. The present moment is a means to an end. The end is what will make me happy. I'm using now to get to that. You know, see how insane it is? Happy now or not happy now? Aware now or not aware now? And if this moment is only being used to reach another one that doesn't really exist except in the mind, we're kind of insane, aren't we? We have actually desecrated that which is holy without even knowing it. This is what's holy. Only this now. I am is only here now. It's not I will be. It's the name of God is I am. So this is the calling. This is how we walk through the so-called void. So when we're aware that we are having to sacrifice some of our old comfortable prisons and identities, that we haven't been asked for a vote on this in most cases. They're just taken away. Have you noticed? Sometimes we get to vote. Sometimes we get to look at the prison cell. I was talking to a woman in California the other day who was talking about something that she's been stuck in a long time, and she's thinking about leaving it. And, of course, she knows it's a prison, and she knows she's attached. And I said, look, you know, in my view, when the warden comes and opens the prison door, you don't say to the warden, just a minute, I need to make my bunk. You get out that door. So... But, of course, that's not how we humans do. We often say, let me make my bunk, because we're uncertain where we belong, huh? This isn't always so clear to us. So we're going to look at how we can together look at it more clearly. And we want to be very, very merciful about this, because as I said to us all of us that were gathered last night, you will forget what I'm saying this week about 1,000 times. Your mind will come in and talk to you about what's important, and it won't be now. And you will listen. You will think God just spoke. I have to go do this, it will say. This has to be taken care of. And although that may be, in fact be true, if you get lost in that thought and forget to be aware of the presence while you're moving toward it, which is the temptation and usually what happens to those of us that have been conditioned to be humans, then you'll be temporarily lost again. And then you'll kind of blink awake and go, oh, I got caught and I did this on the way here. Just so you know, I'm in this with you. I would be driving along and thinking, I just want to get to that next city. You know, it was 1,500 miles. The ego kept cranking in there. At one time, what life decided was that my car should stop running in Amarillo for 24 hours so that I could understand that God is not just in Birmingham or in some future moment. And I got to rest in a hotel room. And it wasn't a hotel room I really liked much. And it certainly isn't one of my favorite towns. Amarillo. But the dealer was nice, and I kept noticing that things were still unfolding well, and they were getting fixed. So, I don't stand outside these lessons that I tell you. I'm simply sharing with you the perceptions, the understandings, and the awakenings that are occurring here so that we can work together to help each other have mercy for the fact that we will all forget many, many, many times on the way to living in the full abiding state of ever-present conscious awareness that I am the divine and the infinite source is living me. Not as a bunch of words, but as a living reality. This is the truth. It is what the infinite is intending in and through each of us, and we will be here. In the field of time, it may take time. That's why love is such a critical part of all spiritual teachings, or what I call heart or mercy. Because if we're hard on ourselves for the fact that we get lost and we get confused and we forget and we become frightened, and those things happen within the human dimensions of our consciousness, then we will go directly into what I consider one of the great diseases of humanity, self-judgment, self-condemnation. I should let go and let God more. I should surrender more. I should be conscious more. And now we have the ego pretending to be spiritual, whipping on the part that it's of itself that it calls not so spiritual. Do you see the insanity of this kind of curriculum? And I am particularly in service to pointing out the error of it. We are the divine. You're not ever not going to be the divine. And the divine wanted to go to sleep part of the time as you. And as a spiritual adult, you are going to learn to let the divine go to sleep and wake up on its own terms. And you're going to stop judging the process. You're going to accept your place in the process of awakening. You're going to know that awakening is happening as fast as it wants to through you. And you're going to get out of control of the spiritual game. You never were in it anyway. It's all it really is the ego's lie about how it can maintain some degree of control over something it has no control over. As we relax and let life be as it is, awakening happens much more easily with much less resistance through much more grace. That's how it happens. And you will now read the next book that says, look, it's a great story Eckhart tells about the person that goes to spiritual retreat with him, and he says, if you go home and tell them that all I told you about is the present moment, I said, nobody's going to understand. He said, but if you tell them that, when they ask what you learned at this retreat, that, well, I learned 7 steps, and it will take me 7 years to reach enlightenment. And they'll say, oh, you got your money's worth then. Because this is the ego's idea of value. Work. Progress. But it's not accurate, you see. It's just it's misinformation. And it's very popular because it's being sold to the part of us that doesn't really want to wake up, that just wants to have a new job toward waking up. Doesn't really want to be awake. Then I wouldn't have anything to do. So So anyway, I've penetrated enough of the misleading stuff here. Let's don't be harsh. Let's be gentle with each other. Let's recognize that transition is the name of the game here at Unity of Birmingham, in my life and in yours. Let's show up to it as best we can with a lot of mercy for the structures that have been conditioned in the old way. They are not going to just go away overnight in most cases. They reassert themselves time and time again in many guises. Allow them a little latitude. Just recognize they are not who you are. You are this presence in which this conversation is taking place. There's only one of them. We say it every week. Let's at least give it a chance to be more fully realized. We are this one presence in form, having a conversation with itself, with an authentic interest in waking up from the dream of separation and fear. When we look at one another, we are like two waves in the ocean of the infinite, looking at itself in another form. This is the truth. Anything less than this is a way around the truth. Usually it's a detour of the ego. It's okay, we'll let the ego have its detours, but once in a while we want to look. Kind of like me and this guy here do. We'll lower our glasses. Come on, do it with me. We're going to lower our glasses and look again and say, oh yeah, that's myself. The deepest truth of love is to see that all forms are the same self that I am. Then our actions move out of integrity automatically. We don't have to have a set of rules and morals that are integrous. We automatically, when we know it's myself I speak to, we will operate with integrity. We will give the best we can to the moment, won't we? Yes? And if some of us are in a void, we'll have arms grown strong enough, metaphorically, with a love that allows for the wilderness experience to be there for each other. Confusion, uncertainty, these are part of the wilderness. They lead to the promised land. We don't hold anyone in the wilderness, but we allow for those periods. Yes? Can we do that together? Does this feel hearted to you? Bless you. Thank you. This theme for a few weeks, further parts of the story. Though as a spiritual community, we participate together in giving, and as a community, we also join together now in receiving these gifts. And in this holy instant, we consecrate them and dedicate them to the expression of awakening of all humans from the field of fear and suffering via grace. In the name of the Christ in us all. Amen.